Well, this was what was bound to happen. Basically, the fact that Brexit is not going to go well, the UK and particularly Boris Johnson government is now going to have to wage a war of words, not with the EU, but with the British public themselves. So, if a time traveller from the mid-20th century had suddenly arrived in London on Monday, they might have learned some alarming facts about Britain. It's In his first major speech since we left the EU, the Prime Minister eulogised the country's newly recaptured powers, declaring that we were re-emerging after decades of hibernation as a campaigner for global free trade, and revealed we would reach out to the rest of the Commonwealth and engage with Japan. How had Britain isolated itself from free trade? Why had it been unable to do business with its international friends? What dastardly power had colonised the mighty UK? The truth was, of course, more prosaic. The fact that the UK pioneered the EU's single market, the world's deepest and most comprehensive transactional trade zone, has now ejected it to replace it with communal barriers. Japan signed a trade deal with the market in 2018, and the EU has engineered such a brake on the Commonwealth trade that in 2018 Germany exported 125% more to India and 100% more to Australia than we do. The only cage we have imprisoned the UK in is one of its own hubristic making. The policy has not changed, but the words have. The Foreign Office memo this week confirmed the government's new approach. Officials no longer use the terms deep and special partnership to refer to the, quote, implementation period. The outcomes on offer now are either the Canada, which used to be known as a hard Brexit, or Australia, which used to be known as trading on WTO terms, or, more succinctly, no deal. The most offensive new line insists that we will restore our economic and political independence on January 2021, as if though the UK is fighting the last battle to liberate itself from an invading empire, not voluntarily cutting itself off from the world's largest trading bloc. The government's campaign is no military but emotional, and it is not being waged against the EU but the British people. The target and tactics are the language itself. Governments have long sanctioned and banned certain words and phrases from official parlance. The message and discipline is not itself a mark of extremism, and yet there is a difference between framing the narrative and reinventing it altogether. From the very beginning, Brexit has depended on distortion. In the 2016 Leave campaigners used language to both terrify and mollify them. Voters were promised the exact same benefits of EU membership at the same time as posters announced that Turkey was joining the EU. The most important slogan of all pledged that we would take back control of our money, borders and laws. It didn't matter that we already had it. Campaigners tapped into a sense of both powerlessness and loss. Boris Johnson understands the power of language and articulately and intensively. In 2016, he knew that people wanted to take back control, and in 2019 realised they finally wanted to get Brexit done. The slogans are designed to ring through people's heads and convince them that we are doing the right thing, even when the evidence to the contrary begins to mount. It doesn't matter that Australia is negotiating a free trade deal with the EU, and in any case a relatively minor trade partner on the other side of the world. This friendly-sounding euphemism from no deal helps the government cover up what is already being done and obscures the reality of what is about to do next. Johnson is in fact closer to Theresa May than he appears to realise. She too littered her premiership with the calorie-free sound bites designed to simply conceal the activity to mislead. After months of Brexit means Brexit, she promised an implementation period with nothing to implement, and then a strong and stable government in the face of mounting chaos. Perhaps the most shameless was a global Britain that would impose barriers on both foreign and trade and foreign people. Even the word Canada, was a clever piece of marketing, suggesting a progressive model for cooperation while actually necessitating a vast contraction to our economy and free trade. In the end, words came to signify the opposite of meanings. Why does the government think it can get away with promising something sunny and open as Australia, when in reality it will mean a self-imposed commercial blockade? Why does Dominic Raab deny that there will be checks on the Irish border when they will be experienced by businesses and people? Perhaps ministers are softening people for the worst. Perhaps they genuinely believe their own hype. The most accurate answer may be, in fact, the most troubling. If a government wishes to control its people's attitudes, it must first learn their lexicon. This is not simply an attempt to refrain voters' opinions, but their minds. The government seeks to confuse us with jargon, misinformation, and contradictory statements, and deploys slogans to anesthetize us from its actions. We will eventually become so exhausted that we believe the government when it tells us to blame someone else or stop caring altogether. This indeed is not taking control, but of the people, not for them. A time traveller from the last century might not understand Brexit, but would understand the government tactics. Clearly, the language enacts George Orwell's most chilling warning that we reject the evidence of our eyes and ears. And that's exactly what we are going to see more and more from the coming year. So, once again, expect us to go heavily and deeply into all these lies that Johnson and his government are pulling out. Because there won't be any truth to them. There will just be concrete lies. Slogans do not make policy. Policy is what has consequences to this country. Slogans do nothing. It is policy. And this is what is being currently discussed. This is what is so important. And as we are seeing, it is very likely, I highly suspect, that Johnson knew that it could never ever get a no deal through while it was pretending, what it was shooting for. If the government does indeed want that, a no deal Brexit, then it knew that it couldn't say so while it was trying to get the withdrawal agreement done. However, now that it is past the withdrawal agreement, at the end of the year, if Johnson is stupid enough to actually do that, he can go with a no-deal Brexit. And rebranding it as, quote, an Australia deal is exactly what this seems to be going for. So this is both terrifying and this is the worst case scenario. A no-deal Brexit will absolutely damage this country. The only place you'll be fine is if you're in London. So if you're in London, you'll be fine. Everywhere else is going to suffer. And this is all for an ideological project that has already shown that it cannot work.